Now going into our Kickstarter segment of the show, we are speaking verification stage for Somalia's bid to join the East African community. There is a meeting or a summit of heads of state that is due, and we are asking, will it bear fruit for the Horn of Africa nation, or will it bring the leaders up to speed with the realities of the time and perhaps look at the things in a more concerted manner? Just give you a preamble before I introduce my guest, and later we shall be joined by the others. The East African community conducted a verification mission to assess, I must say, the Federal Republic of Somalia's readiness to join the community. The verification team of experts from the EAC partner states were in Somalia from the 25th of January to the 3rd of February this year to establish the country's level of conformity with the criteria for admitting foreign countries as provided in the treaty for the establishment of the EAC. The technical team, I'm told, in Mogadishu will engage Somalia to ensure that the verification is finalized and the report completed in time and in readiness for presentation to the East African Community Council of Ministers, who will table it for consideration on the 23rd Summit of East African Heads of State that is scheduled for end of this month. Here with me this morning to help us understand the dynamics at play and what stands in play in the way of Somalia coming into the East African community, or if it does, what it means for the rest of the region, is Herbert Seronjoji, an expert in international relations and diplomacy, but also, very interestingly, a human development consultant at MindGrow. We've been having a conversation off air about human development and the need for human resource, and anyone out there that finds themselves in a cluster of people trying to do something to transform themselves, why they need soft skills. That's a discussion for another day. But allow me welcome Herbert Seronjoji on the show. A very good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
First time to see you. Very interesting that you are in this sector for human development. I'll leave it at that and concentrate on international relations and diplomacy, and especially in light of verification stage for Somalia's bid to join the East African community. First and foremost, bring us up to speed with where the East African community is right now before we even understand the need for us to have other countries on board.
Thank you for having me and your viewers. First of all, the East African community, where it is now, it is kind of very delicate. There are so many countries which don't add up, and you wonder what is it that they bring on table in this whole context of the East African community. So, to talk about Somalia, the question is, what is it that is going to bring on table versus the confusion which is already existing in the East African community?
The confusion,
yes,
already existing in the East African community.
Yes.
That's a whole discussion for a day. Interesting there. Go ahead.
So, first of all, we need to understand when you talk about verification, what are the criteria? What is it they are verifying? What does it take for a country to join such a regional bloc, the East African community for that matter?
That's right.
First of all, these requirements, in my view, they are very basic. Things like a geographical proximity to a nation, interdependence on partner countries, adherence to international principles of human rights, rule of law, good governance. When you punch holes into all of that in the countries which are already members, it's up to the viewers to decide whether it's really important to bring Somalia on board, or if it really doesn't qualify, or if it qualifies.
Okay, before we even look at whether it qualifies or not, already we've just had the Democratic Republic of Congo brought on board, and many of the proponents of this particular thinking say that the DRC presents a huge market for most of us, especially within Uganda, to advance our economic agenda, to be able to do business. Kenya has shown us, and it's very aggressive when it comes to establishing businesses there, and something that puts Uganda in a bit of a pale position. Within the workings of the existing framework, we must be able to show progress and dividends. Can you show us any, so that we concentrate on the positives and don't find ourselves looking overly at the negatives?
I agree with you, Mr. Maybe for the sake of the conversation, we need to understand that diplomacy is not an event. It's a process.
It's a process, yeah.
So I agree with you. I don't want to be too harsh. I don't want to sound very harsh on those who are trying to make an effort. I agree there's a lot which is being done, but I also want people to understand that the forces against the integration of the East African community are way, way, way bigger than the forces which are working for it. So in their effort, it's really very muddy for them to achieve so much. First of all, the countries within the East African community, they are at a very different levels
of economic growth
in every sector, socially, economically, politically, security. So that's why in the first place I said that what is it that they are looking at, because the standards are not even clear. What is it that qualifies one to be into the East African community? What does this one come with? What is the value addition? We can talk about the market DRC brings to the table, but the question is, do Congolese have capacity to really buy anything?
Interesting.
What is their economic position in a general term? I know there are over 95 million people in Congo, but most of them live way below the poverty line.
Allow me to draw context here and bring in the European Union and the creation of this particular economic bloc. One would say as far back as 50 years ago, countries within Europe were, of course, developed and pretty much could be able to work, find a framework within themselves to come into an economic bloc. But again, they were at different levels. You cannot, for example, say that Britain was at the same level with another in the eastern parts of Europe. But there was a framework upon which they worked on. And it is the same thinking that should govern the workings of the East African community, that even if Burundi is at a stage it is, Kenya must find a way, or can actually find a way to accommodate it within the economic ecosystem so that it benefits and improves, while also making sure that it earns and gets a lot more advantages from such a country.
I agree. However, you brought a very good example of the European Union. I acknowledge that the countries are not at the same stages of development.
That's right.
In terms of infrastructure, human resource, security, and even the economic part of it. But I want also to bring to your attention that up to today, Turkey has been a candidate member for life. Because it doesn't qualify certain specifics. What I don't understand in the East African community is what are the specifics that may not qualify one and therefore qualifies another. That's where I really don't understand in the East African community.
Well, looking at the fact that expansion is looked at by the proponents, including President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, as one thing that we must be able to take on if we are to go forward. It's understandable when somebody says, well, we need more economic muscle and power in order to improve our bargaining chances in international trade. This is something that is, well, understandable, and something you can look at, that we can give a chance to. Shouldn't we be looking at ensuring that Somalia comes on board, especially within that way of thinking?
Mr. Again, like I said in the start, that I shouldn't pour cold water on people who are making an effort. Yeah. Especially President Yoweri Museveni. He's first of all Pan-Africanist, and he has inspired so many African leaders. So the efforts made should be recognized, but the forces against integration are way, way, way more than those which are working for it.
Inevitably, I find myself in a position where I now must discuss what forces are those that are against integration and why that argument is particularly being fronted. What are those things that make it a challenge for the East African community to function as well as it ought to?
There are a couple of them.
Yeah, please.
Number one, some of the members in the East African community belong to other regional bodies. For example, Tanzania is a member of SADC.
Yeah.
So you wonder where its commitment is. If East African community is dilly-dallying, you know, SADC is a bit more organized, more resourced. Tanzania is likely to focus on where?
On SADC more than the EAC.
More than the EAC.
Okay.
SADC is more stable. So those dynamics that a particular country belongs to more than one regional bloc is a disadvantage to these other regional bodies. And number two, there is what we call the North, the superpowers. It's not in their interest for Africans to unite and you do business together. So the way the international system works is very, very interesting. No one is up there, like, it's not your business to come into my house and feed my children. It's not in your interest to make sure that I pick every opportunity. In the international system, everybody is trying to fend for his country, for himself.
That's right.
So all those are very serious challenges. So it's not going to happen. It may not happen. I wish it does. But unfortunately, it may not happen in our lifetime to see regional integration the way we should have it.
In other words, you're advising the leaders of the day and inevitably the people, including ourselves, the media, to be real and look at these things as they are and not necessarily what we want them to be.
100%. I'm a realist.
Okay?
Yes.
In other words, we should disengage from making effort for economic integration and political federation.
We shouldn't. In the start, I said the diplomacy is not an event. It's a process. We shouldn't be so harsh on those making an effort, but their hands are tied. They may achieve a certain degree. We should go ahead and try our best. Good luck. But like I said, forces against us are not so good. Not in our lifetime, we may not see what we want to see. I don't see that happen.
For this particular conversation, I'm particularly dismayed that Timothy Kalyejira and Mr. Richard Byabakama, both very informed on issues of international relations, haven't been able to make it on time because it would help us sufficiently tackle some of these issues. And I cannot even claim to be an expert to counter your arguments. But allow me conduct an examination of these factors. If Uganda desists from the kind of momentum that President Yoweri Museveni has created when it comes to the East African community and the political federation, perhaps are you suggesting we would have a lot more time and resources to concentrate on doing the things within the confines of Uganda's economy than to lie to ourselves that there's a lot that we can pursue in as far as integration is concerned?
I wouldn't say yes or no. Either way, the focus, in my view, should be on both sovereignty and we create a degree of stability as nation states, as an individual state.
Yeah.
Then from there must be frameworks of engagement with other states after each country has examined itself. Right now, we are grappling with so many problems from outside.
That's right.
The other day we are in DRC, the other day we are in Sudan, another day we are in the Congo, we are in the Somalia. For our president, His Excellency Mr. Museveni, is doing this from a Pan-African point of view, which is very good for our continent, but it's taking a toll on national issues. At certain point, he's too busy with the external factors. other than domestic policies.
That's interesting. There is a conversation here that is completely, it could flip my own understanding of these matters, but of course learning is a process that happens on a daily basis. Allow me ask you to help us understand whether COMESA, SADC, East African Community, and one country being a member of any one of these or two affects its ability to meet its obligations in either. Can't a country that is already a member of the international community, has so many charters upon which it's acting in terms of obligations, fail to address itself to the issues of a smaller setting like the East African Community, while also being a good member of COMESA as well as SADC?
Yes, it can affect the commitment of one country to a particular regional bloc. Like I said, the COMESA, East African Community. First of all, each regional bloc has its own agenda. So it is hard on some countries to decide which way to go. Some agendas might be contrary to what the other regional bloc is pursuing. For example, if it's a security matter and the one regional bloc has to decide whether to go to Somalia and the SADC is against it, where will Tanzania stand?
Interesting. Thank you very much. For now, I'm going to have to break and return. You are watching Morning at NTV, the Kickstarter discussion, and we are looking at the verification stage for Somalia's bid to become a member of the East African. I'm Chris Higenyi. On set this morning is Herbert Serunjoji, an expert in international relations and diplomacy, helping us understand the verification process for Somalia's bid to enter the East African Community. But as you are understanding or getting to know, for those that went with us into the break, the whole process of getting members on board onto the East African Community dispensation is something that needs to be critiqued. Is it the best thing to do right now? Or nation states must ensure that what is happening within their borders is improved, rectified, or bettered before we can seek the kind of communion within the geographical setting of the continent in this particular part is concerned. Shortly, we shall be hearing, seeing a report on what's happening in Somalia, something that should be able to open our eyes to some of the issues in that country. But as that comes on board, just some statistics that are crucial when it comes to Somalia. 17 million people, according to the World Bank report, in 2021. At that point, nominal GDP was $7.628 billion. Somalia is a federal republic. It is a republic and a parliamentary republic at the same time. Political scientists could come in handy here. Chris Higenyi is confused. Informal sector of the economy is livestock, remittances from the diaspora, as well as telecommunications industries. Those are the big three that provide the money. The president right now is Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, and the Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre. That's just a little bit of what Somalia is. When Somalia comes on board the East African Community, it will be bringing in that dividend. A trade between Uganda and Somalia, for example, is very, very minute. Uganda trades $676,000 to Somalia on an annual basis. Most of what we export are aircraft parts, bottled, I just want to get this right, rolled tobacco, and beer. Those are the three biggest exports to Somalia. Aircraft parts. Uganda has been in Somalia as part of a contingent of the AMISOM since 2007, so you can understand why we export aircraft parts to Somalia. Tobacco and beer is a question. Somalia is a Muslim nation. Why we are exporting too much beer to it is also something that is different. Somalia brings to Uganda fish, dried, smoked, and brine. They also export light mixed woven cotton to Uganda. So the trade dynamics are different. Let's take a look at this story that was done by Francis Jingo.
For about 10 days, the experts assigned by the Secretary General of the East African Community, Dr. Peter Mathuki, have been in Somalia to assess the country's readiness to join the East African Community bloc. And after several engagements with Somali authorities, the verification mission team has assured the Somali government that come by the end of February, Somalia will be a member of the community.
Our heads of state will discuss this matter for the coming summit. It is planned for 25th of February. Make sure something will come out that will make Federal Republic of Somalia to be one of the parts of this community.
For close to 2 decades now, the Muslim country has been suffering under the terror of the militant group, the Al-Shabaab. But the Somali government says Al-Shabaab will soon be history.
Despite the security threat posed by Al-Shabaab in Somalia, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud have declared an all-out war against the militant organizations and initiated a multi-pronged approach to counter them. To date, Somalian National Army-led efforts have resulted in a clearing Al-Shabaab from virtually all Hirshabelle and Galmudug states in central Somalia.
They believe that joining the East African Community is a gateway to dealing with the crisis and rebuilding a new Somalia.
Membership of the EAC will result in deepening more extensive collaboration on security matters, including counterterrorism, intelligence sharing, combating organized crime, and this will thus foster growing peace and stability in the region.
When our country collapsed, when the civil war torn our country apart, our weaker ones, our people desperately crossed the borders, seeking only peace, nothing else. You are not putting us in the community. We have already been in there and member of the family. We are part and parcel of you.
You have sent your boys and girls to defend us, especially Kenya, Uganda, and Burundi, and we appreciate. We will never forget.
And Somalia will add a great deal to the community in terms of, because of their entrepreneurial and the fact that they are also have connections with the Gulf states.
Somalia applied to join the EAC in 2012, but the process was put on hold until recently when the heads of state tasked the Council of Ministers to verify the country's readiness to join the East African Community. Jingo Francis, NTV.
Many thanks, Jingo Francis, for that report. Herbert Serunjoji. I must be very, very categorical. You've listened to the leaders from Somalia making their case, why they need to be part of the East African community. Let's look at it from that point of view. Let's step away from the Uganda frame and look at this picture from Mogadishu. A country that is emerging from war, conflict, and generally unease, is seeking the opportunities that come from being a member of a bloc like the East African community. If you were a Somali national, wouldn't this make perfect sense?
Yeah, it may make sense to the Somalis, yes.
Shouldn't we give the Somalis an opportunity to enjoy those dividends?
Okay. I don't know of any partnership which is one way.
Sure.
You cannot join a partnership where you are only a receiver. I don't know what Somalia comes with in this setting of the East African community. I know it's a strategic location.
Yeah.
It's access to the international
It has
waters.
the longest coastal line on Africa mainland, and
Yes.
Perhaps our ability to reach the coastline could be improved. Is that something we can look at?
I don't know ours means what, because by look of things, all its problems started there. It's access to international waters.
That's where the problems are.
Yes. So
piracy.
all superpowers want access to that place. So where are we benefiting as a bloc, East African community?
Uganda has provided troops on the AMISOM mandate since 2007. We've taken 12 battle groups since then. We've provided 5 commanders. And when you look at our exports, aircraft parts perhaps informs exactly the kind of trade that we have with Somalia. And now, military itself is expenditure and revenue. It depends on which end you are. Uganda should be led to get some money as we export aircraft parts. We import and then export because we don't make aircraft parts.
Like I said, Mr. Yeah, we should allow people making an effort to see how much these blocks can come together and each country to make a contribution. But much as the world is advocating for internationalism, I think there's a lot of mess in some of these countries to join any bloc. First of all, there are basics, even if a country to be called a state. Some of member states in the East African community
don't qualify to be states.
Some basics, they don't. Some countries don't control their borders. They don't control. You go to Congo, sometimes you wonder whether this is a state or something. Part of Sudan, rather
South Sudan.
Yeah, for a moment for South Sudan. Part of Somalia.
Somalia, rather.
Wants independence.
The North, Somaliland.
Yes, actually they think.
It actually operates already as an independent. Yeah,
yes.
I think the confederation aspects are the ones that are supposed to be final touches put to.
Exactly, but in the context of what you have just shown us, they are coming as one state. The Mogadishu government has no control over the North.
The North. Okay. That you think could be another dynamic that complicates the country's ability to be a good member?
Yes, and its contribution to the East African community. What are we trying to talk about here is that there are so many domestic issues on each member state that needs to be focused on before really we focus so much on the regional bloc. For example, off air we discussed something like we are trying to help each other. We are so Pan-African, we are so brotherly. Everybody wants to help everybody, but your house is still a mess.
Yeah, I think you brought about the analogy of a father on a village who is all over helping a neighbor who is in danger, helping a neighbor who is sick, and yet he has a malnourished child among his children. And people are wondering, the resources and time that you take to ensure other people are okay, first ensure that all your children are actually okay, and then have the rest to distribute across the others. That is what you say Uganda finds itself in. Yes,
for example, our president is helping everybody. He is, I think, kind by nature. He's Pan-Africanist. He's doing so much for so many other places. Not to undermine what he's doing here, but if he focuses more on domestic issues, I think Uganda would be a big player in this region, much as it still is.
Allow me ask my guest, expert in international relations and diplomacy, Herbert Serunjoji, whether Somalia's walk into the East African community will actually come through.
Oh yeah, it will. It will. Like from the start, I told you, the standards to join are basic. Are very basic. Very basic. The issue is proximity, geographical proximity to partner states, interdependence to other members of the regional bloc.
The regional bloc.
And adherence to rule of law, good governance, democracy. If you examine other member states, is Somalia interdependent on some states in the East African community? The answer is yes. Is there any geographical proximity to Somalia? The answer is yes. Maybe the question is on adherence to rule of law, good governance. Yeah.
And that's down to the capacity of a particular nation to improve its own issues within its borders, so that it can actually show that they adhere to the rule of law.
Yes.
We all understand the kind of effort that is going on in Somalia, especially as it moves away from that tribal way of governance into what is no doubt now a cocktail of republic, parliamentary, and federal nation.
I agree.
Interesting there. Your final word, you are a human development consultant at Mind Grow, and looking at the discussion there between Stephen Mbide and Joe Walker, he says, the causes of some of the problems, especially on the roads, is down to individuals. And as a human development consultant, what ought to be the basic foundation for a country like Uganda if we are to improve our politics, our economy, but most importantly, how society operates? In a minute.
I can say that in 2 words. Is how we think, and it's about our mind.
Okay.
Yes. We need to change the way we think, the way I think about you when I see you cycling, when I'm driving.
Yeah.
I need to change the way I think when I see you starving, when I'm throwing food. I need to change the way I think when I see myself with luxury, when other people can barely survive. So the rest will come naturally. We need to work on how we think. Actually, there is nothing called middle class or middle income. You can be a first-class money magnet, but you may not be a middle income mind person.
Wow.
The way you think is everything. It's up here.
Everything.
It's up here. You may have everything, but you still behave like you are in the dark ages.
All right. Thank you very much. Habat Serunjoji, Human Development Consultant at Mind Grow, and also international relations expert, as well as a mind on diplomacy. Well, I hope those that are advocating for greater numbers within the East African community understand whether we ought to pursue that particular line or not, whatever the disadvantages, the advantages, and whether the politicians are actually prioritizing the issues of the day within the nation states themselves is, of course, a debate